stood in the glass conference room, my hands shaking as I clutched the printed obituary. The paper felt impossibly heavy, like it contained the weight of everything I'd lost. Arnold Wexler, my director, sat at the head of the table, his expression completely blank as he stared at me. "My son's funeral is Wednesday," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Arnold didn't even look up from his laptop. "And the client pitch is Wednesday. If you're not here, don't bother coming back at all." The silence in the room was suffocating. 6 other people sat around that table, and not one of them met my eyes. They all suddenly found their phones or notebooks incredibly interesting. My legs nearly buckled beneath me. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him understand that he was asking me to choose between burying my child and keeping my job. But I swallowed the scream, forcing it down into a place so deep it might never surface. I nodded once and walked out of that conference room on unsteady legs. "My name is Monica Reeves. And the day my boss forced me to choose between burying my child and keeping my job was the day I stopped being afraid." The funeral was cold in every sense of the word. February wind cut through the cemetery, and I stood alone by the small casket, my coat pulled tight around me. Callum had been 7 years old. 7 years of laughter and sticky hands and bedtime stories that would never continue. My ex-husband Neil arrived 20 minutes late, his mother Dorothy trailing behind him. I heard her loud whisper before I saw her. "She's always been so dramatic about everything. Making such a scene." I pretended not to hear, but the words burrowed into my chest like glass shards. Neil stood next to me briefly, but he was checking his phone within 5 minutes. Dorothy kept her distance, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue for show. No one from work came. Not a single person. The priest spoke words I didn't hear. People I barely knew offered condolences I couldn't process. And when they lowered my baby into the ground, I made a silent promise. "They're going to regret this," I whispered. "All of them." I returned to work on Monday. No one said anything about where I'd been. No condolences. No acknowledgement. Just fake smiles and eyes that slid away from mine when I walked past. My desk had been moved. Not just rearranged. Completely relocated to a different area, away from the windows I'd worked beside for 3 years. A new junior associate sat where my nameplate used to be, looking uncomfortable when I passed by. Arnold called me into his office at 10 in the morning. "Monica, we've made some adjustments to your role," he said, not offering me a seat. "You'll be shadowing the new junior for a while. Getting him up to speed on your accounts." "Shadowing," I repeated. "Just temporarily. Until we're confident in the transition." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sure you understand. Given your recent circumstances, we thought a lighter workload might be better." I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth hurt. "Of course. Thank you for thinking of me." His smile widened, satisfied. He thought he'd broken me. That night, I came home to an empty apartment that still smelled like my son. His toys were in the corner where I couldn't bring myself to move them. His backpack hung by the door. I found one of Callum's socks wedged under the couch cushion. Blue. With cartoon dinosaurs on it. The breakdown hit me like a physical force. I doubled over, pressing my face into the cushion to muffle the sobs. I couldn't scream, the neighbors would hear. So I cried silently, clutching that tiny sock until my hands cramped. The company coffee mug sat on my coffee table. The logo mocked me. Everything mocked me. My laptop pinged with an email notification. I wiped my eyes and checked it. "Deck edits due 7 a.m. Please prioritize." Sent at 11:30 at night. I stared at that email for a long time. Then I closed my laptop, walked to my bedroom, and pulled a locked file box from the back of my closet. Inside was a thick folder labeled, "Buyout Proposal, Parr and Lynch Group." My grief crystallized into something harder, something focused. The next morning I met my colleague Teresa in the break room. She looked nervous, avoiding eye contact as she poured her coffee. "Teresa," I said quietly, "did anyone mention my absence last week?" She shifted uncomfortably. Arnold told us not to bring up anything personal at work. He said it distracts from productivity. My hands tightened around my mug. He said that. Yeah. In the team meeting on Thursday. I'm sorry, Monica. I wanted to say something, but I went straight to my computer and accessed my email archives. It took 20 minutes of searching, but I found what I was looking for. An HR email thread I'd been copied on months ago. Arnold had been notified twice about Callum's funeral. Once by me, once by HR confirming my bereavement leave request. His response in writing: "She'll either show up or she won't. If not, we replace her." I printed the email and added it to my folder. Evidence, documentation, ammunition. I spent the next week playing exactly the role Arnold expected. Be broken. Grateful for any scraps of work he threw my way. "Thank you for being patient with me," I told him during a one-on-one meeting. "I know I haven't been myself." "It's understandable," he replied, magnanimous now that he thought he'd won. "Take your time. No rush." He was setting me up for failure. I could see it clearly now. The marginalization, the reduced responsibilities, the junior associate learning my job. He was building a case to let me go. But Arnold had made a critical mistake. He assumed I had nowhere to go. No options. No plan. That evening, I opened the locked file box again and spread the contents across my dining table. Financial projections. Organizational charts. Acquisition timelines. Letters of intent. I picked up my phone and made a call. "Elliot. It's Monica. We need to meet. Soon." "How soon?" Elliot Parr's voice was cautious but interested. "Tomorrow night. I have everything you asked for. And more." The rejection had happened a year ago, though it felt like a lifetime now. I'd been passed over for promotion to senior account director. The position went to Marcus, a man I'd personally trained when he joined the company. I'd gone to Arnold's office to ask why. "You're not a leadership fit," he'd said, barely glancing up from his computer. "You're too emotionally reactive. Clients need stability. I've closed more deals than Marcus in half the time. It's not always about numbers, Monica. It's about presence." I'd left his office shaking with rage and humiliation. That night, I'd contacted an old college friend I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Elliot Parr. Investment executive. Low profile but powerful. We'd met for coffee, and I'd laid out exactly what I knew about Parr and Lynch. The toxic culture, the high turnover, the artificially inflated metrics Arnold used to make himself look good. "If you're serious about expanding into this sector," I'd said, "I can help you from the inside." Elliot had listened. And then he'd started planning. Our meeting took place at a quiet restaurant across town, far from anyone who might recognize us. Elliot arrived exactly on time as always. He was methodical, precise, everything Arnold pretended to be. "How are you holding up?" he asked, and unlike everyone at work, he actually meant it. "I'm managing," I replied. "Let's talk business." I slid a folder across the table. Inside were internal reports I'd compiled over the past year. Turnover rates by department. Documentation of hostile work environment complaints that had been quietly buried. Performance metrics showing Arnold's division was actually underperforming compared to the rest of the company. "This is the weak point," I said, tapping one particular document. "Arnold's been doctoring reports to the board for 2 years. The division looks profitable on paper, but dig deeper and you'll find serious problems." Elliot reviewed everything carefully. "This is exactly what we need. If we can demonstrate leadership failure at the director level, the board will welcome restructuring." "How long until the acquisition closes?" 3 months. Maybe less if everything stays on track. He looked at me seriously. "Are you sure you want to do this? There's no going back." "I'm sure." I became meticulous about documentation. Every interaction with Arnold was noted, dated, filed away. Every inappropriate comment overheard. Every policy violation witnessed. The junior associate who'd taken my desk made a mistake on a client proposal. Arnold screamed at him in the middle of the office, loud enough for everyone to hear. I recorded the time, date, and witnesses. When a female colleague was passed over for a promotion in favor of a less qualified man, I documented it. When Arnold made a joke about another employee's maternity leave, I noted it. Nothing illegal, just patterns. Evidence of exactly the kind of toxic leadership that justified cleaning house. I forwarded everything to Elliot in secure, encrypted emails. He built the case file systematically, adding my internal intelligence to his external analysis. We were building a weapon. And Arnold had no idea it was pointed directly at him. Neil showed up at my apartment unannounced on a Tuesday evening. I'd been expecting this. Dorothy's fingerprints were all over it. "We need to talk about the property," he said, pushing past me into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. The property. A small rental house we'd purchased together during our marriage. Callum had loved that house. "What about it?" "I think we should sell. Split the profit. Move on." He pulled out papers, already prepared, already drafted. Callum would have wanted us to be practical. The audacity of using our dead son to manipulate me was breathtaking. "I'll think about it," I said, taking the papers. "Dorothy wants to help you through this difficult time," Neil added, as if reading from a script. "She knows she hasn't always been supportive, but family is family." I smiled thinly. How thoughtful. After he left, I photographed every page of those documents and sent them to my lawyer. Because I knew what this was. An attempt to strip me of assets while I was vulnerable. They thought grief had made me stupid. Arnold called me into his office 3 weeks after the funeral. He had that satisfied look on his face that I'd come to recognize, the expression of someone about to deliver bad news they'd been looking forward to sharing. "Monica, we have a situation. The Harrington account is struggling. They're threatening to pull their contract." He leaned back in his chair. "I'm putting you in charge of salvaging it." The Harrington account was a disaster. Everyone knew it. The previous account manager had quit rather than deal with it. The client was demanding, impossible to please, and the contract was structured terribly. This was a setup. He was giving me an account designed to fail so he could document my failure and justify termination. "I appreciate your confidence in me," I said, accepting the folder he slid across the desk. "I thought you'd want the chance to prove yourself," Arnold replied. "Show us you're still committed." Smiled. "I won't let you down." Behind my back, my fingers were crossed. Not for luck, for the lie I was telling. The junior associate who'd taken my desk made a mistake the following week. He accidentally deleted my entire proposal draft for a different client. 3 weeks of work gone. "I'm so sorry," he stammered, his face pale. "I thought I was working in my own folder. I didn't realize." "It's okay," I said calmly. "These things happen." But I immediately filed an incident report with HR. Not aggressively. Just documentation of what happened, with timestamps and recovery costs. I copied the report to my personal email and forwarded it to Elliot. "Culture sample number 12. I wrote in the subject line. The junior wasn't malicious. He was just incompetent, rushed by Arnold to take over responsibilities he wasn't ready for. But that incompetence was itself evidence of Arnold's poor judgment. Every mistake, every failure, every problem that happened under Arnold's leadership was another nail in his coffin. The Harrington account was every bit as terrible as I'd expected. The client was hostile from our first meeting, clearly expecting me to fail. But I'd spent 3 years learning how to handle difficult clients. I knew their industry better than they expected. I stayed late, reworked the entire proposal, and found cost savings they hadn't known were possible. 2 weeks later, Harrington's CEO called me directly. "You pulled off a miracle," he said. "I don't know what magic you worked, but we're staying. Renewing for another 2 years." The next day, Arnold called an all-hands meeting to announce the save. He stood at the front of the room, beaming. "Thanks to the team's hard work," he said, never mentioning my name, "we've secured the Harrington renewal. This is what leadership looks like. I clapped along with everyone else. But that evening, I received an email directly from Harrington's CEO. Monica, you made magic happen when everyone else had given up. Thank you for your professionalism and skill. I forwarded the email to Elliot with one line. This is what you're buying. Dorothy invited me to dinner 3 weeks later. The invitation came via text, surprisingly friendly. Let's bury the hatchet. Family should stick together during hard times. I knew it was a trap, but I went anyway. Knowledge was power, and I wanted to know what they were planning. The restaurant was expensive. Dorothy's choice, of course. She and Neil were already seated when I arrived, papers spread on the table between them. We've been thinking about Callum's inheritance, Dorothy began, her voice dripping with false sympathy. The small trust fund from his grandfather. It's not much, but we thought. You thought I should sign it over to Neil, I finished. They exchanged glances. Neil pushed papers toward me. It's what's fair. What's practical. You're too emotional right now to make good decisions. Too emotional. Like grief was a character flaw. I took photos of every document they'd brought while pretending to read them. Then I excused myself politely. I'll think about it, I lied. Dorothy smiled, thinking she'd won. They had no idea I was documenting everything. Elliot called me on a Friday afternoon. I stepped outside to take the call, walking to a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office. The acquisition has entered final legal review, he said. Barring any surprises, we'll announce in 3 weeks. My heart raced. 3 weeks. After a year of planning, it was finally happening. The board is on board. Yes. Completely. Your documentation of the cultural issues was the final piece they needed. They're ready for restructuring. He paused. Monica, you'll be installed as interim vice president during the transition. Are you ready for that? Yes. This will be public. Mercy. Arnold won't go quietly. I'm counting on it. Took a breath. Make sure it's announced on a Friday. I want everyone to have the weekend to process it. Elliot laughed quietly. You've thought this through. For a year. I suggested a pre-announcement celebration to Arnold 2 weeks later. A party for the leadership team to celebrate the quarter's successes. That's a great idea, Arnold said, his eyes lighting up. Good thinking, Monica. Shows you're a team player. I'd be happy to organize it, I offered. Perfect. Make it special. Spare no expense. He was already mentally taking credit for the idea. I coordinated with Elliot privately. The party would happen on the Friday of the announcement. Arnold would give his self-congratulatory speech to a room full of people, and then everything would change. The venue was booked. Catering ordered. Invitations sent. Everyone RSVP'd yes. Nobody wanted to miss a party on the company dime. Arnold had no idea he was planning his own funeral. I overheard Arnold in the break room the following Tuesday. He was talking to 2 other directors, laughing about something. Remember that tragedy that nearly derailed Q2? He said, still chuckling. Unbelievable timing. But we pushed through. The tragedy. He meant Callum's death. My son's funeral. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and started recording. The break room was around the corner, out of sight. They had no idea I was there. Some people just can't separate personal from professional, another director added. Exactly. That's why leadership matters. Knowing when to compartmentalize. I recorded 2 full minutes before they moved on to other topics. Then I saved the file, backed it up to 3 different locations, and added it to my evidence folder. Title: Final Straw. Some things couldn't be forgiven. This was one of them. A board member named Frank approached me at a company event. He'd had a few drinks, and his usual careful demeanor had slipped. You're doing good work, Monica, he said. Shame about the Harrington account almost imploding under Arnold's watch. Almost. Prompted. Oh, he's been playing games with the metrics for months, making his division look better than it is. Frank leaned closer, conspiratorial. Between you and me, We've been looking for a reason to restructure that entire department. The numbers don't add up. I filed this information away and texted Elliot immediately after Frank wandered off. Board member confirms Arnold's been doctoring metrics. They're looking for justification to restructure. You'll have full support. Elliot's response was immediate. Perfect. Everything's falling into place. The noose was tightening. Arnold just didn't know it yet. Dorothy showed up at my apartment door on a Thursday night. Alone this time without Neil. Her expression was different. Less calculating, more desperate. Monica, I want to apologize. I know I haven't been there for you. Let me be in your life now. I looked at her carefully, searching for sincerity, finding only self-interest. Would you have gone to Callum's funeral if I hadn't specifically invited you? Yes. She opened her mouth, closed it, couldn't find an answer. That's what I thought. I stepped back. Goodbye, Dorothy. I closed the door in her face and locked it. Through the peephole, I watched her stand there for a full minute before finally leaving. That was closure. Not forgiveness. I didn't owe her that. Just closure. The final severing of a relationship that had been dead long before Callum was. I quietly packed up my desk on Thursday. Not everything, just the personal items I actually cared about. Photos. Few books. My good coffee mug. People noticed. I saw the whispers, the sideways glances. They thought I was resigning. Quitting. Finally giving up under the pressure Arnold had been applying. Arnold himself nodded at me smugly when I passed his office with my box. He thought he'd won. Broken me without having to fire me. Saved himself the paperwork. Before leaving that day, I sent one final email. Blind copied to the board, the CEO, and the company's legal team. The subject line was simple. Documentation of workplace concerns. Attached were the recordings. The HR emails. The evidence of Arnold's metric manipulation. Everything I'd collected over the past year. I didn't editorialize. Didn't add commentary. Just facts, dates, and documentation. Then I went home and waited for Friday. The party started at 6. Open bar, expensive catering, the works. Everyone showed up because it was free food and drinks on company time. The energy was celebratory, people laughing and talking about weekend plans. Arnold arrived fashionably late, soaking up attention as he moved through the room. He was holding court, telling stories, accepting congratulations for the quarter's performance. At 7, he clinked his glass to make a speech. I want to thank everyone for their hard work this quarter, he began. We've faced challenges, but we've overcome them through leadership and determination. I stood near the back watching, waiting. At 7:15, Elliot Parr walked through the door. The room went quiet. People recognized him. His photo had been in the business section when his firm announced major acquisitions. But nobody knew why he was here. Elliot walked straight to the front of the room and introduced himself. Good evening. My name is Elliot Parr, and as of this afternoon, I am the majority shareholder of this company. You could hear a pin drop. Arnold's face drained of color. His champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Elliot continued speaking, his voice calm and professional. As part of the acquisition, we'll be implementing immediate leadership restructuring to address long-standing cultural and operational issues. He gestured toward me. I'd like to introduce Monica Reeves, who will be serving as interim vice president during this transition. Every head in the room turned to look at me. Confusion. Disbelief. Arnold found his voice. You can't. Mr. Wexler, you're being terminated effective immediately for cause. Elliot handed him an envelope. The documentation has been provided to HR and legal. You'll need to collect your personal items under supervision. Documentation. What documentation? Arnold's face was turning red. The HR violations, metric manipulation, and hostile work environment complaints that were submitted yesterday to the board, Elliot replied. All thoroughly documented over the past year. Arnold looked around the room, seeking allies. But everyone had read the email I'd sent. Everyone knew what he'd done. Nobody was stepping up to defend him. His eyes finally found mine. Understanding dawned too late. "You," he whispered. Smiled. "Me." I walked into Arnold's former office on Monday morning. His nameplate was already gone, replaced with a temporary sign reading M. Reeves, VP. The desk was clear. The walls were bare. It was like he'd never existed. I sat in his chair, my chair now, and took a deep breath. The view from this office was spectacular. Windows on two sides. I could see the entire city. My mind drifted to Callum's funeral. The promise I'd made standing alone by his grave. To make it matter. To make them regret what they'd done. "This one's for you, baby," I whispered. My first official meeting started in an hour. Department heads. Strategy session. Plans for restructuring and rebuilding a healthier culture. I opened my laptop and began reviewing the agenda. There was so much work to do. So much to fix. But for the first time in a year I felt ready. Not just surviving anymore. In control. Neil lost access to the rental property when my lawyer sent official notice that I was retaining full ownership. The attempted manipulation of Callum's inheritance trust failed when the bank reviewed the documentation I'd provided showing Neil's attempt to coerce my signature. He and Dorothy showed up at my building 2 weeks after the acquisition. Building security called up to ask if I wanted to see them. "I'll come down," I said. They were waiting in the lobby, both looking smaller than I remembered. Diminished. "We didn't mean to," Dorothy started. "You used Callum to manipulate me," I interrupted. "You used my grief as leverage to take what wasn't yours. You showed me exactly who you are." "Monica, please," Neil said. "Now you live with what you built. The choices you made. The person you revealed yourself to be." I turned to the security guard. "Please escort them out. They're not to be allowed back." I watched them leave and felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not anger. Just the quiet relief of finally being free. 3 months later, I walked through the office on a Tuesday morning. The culture had already started changing. People smiled more. Talked more freely. The fear that had hung over everything was lifting. The executive suite door bore a new nameplate. Monica Reeves, Vice President. A young intern rounded the corner too fast and bumped into me, nearly spilling his coffee. "Oh, sorry, ma'am." He looked terrified. Smiled. "It's okay. And call me Monica." "Really? You're sure?" "I'm sure." He hurried off, relieved, and I continued to my office. Through the windows, the city sparkled in the morning sun. Callum would have loved this view. He'd always been fascinated by tall buildings. I thought about him every day. The grief hadn't disappeared, it never would. But it had transformed into something else. Determination. Purpose. The drive to build something better. Arnold had tried to break me when I was already broken. Dorothy and Neil had tried to exploit my grief. They'd all seen my vulnerability as weakness. They were wrong. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I wasn't scrambling or fighting or barely holding on. I was exactly where I belonged. In control of my life. In control of my future. And I'd built it from the ashes of everything they'd tried to destroy.